programs. Today we're going to be talking about reference technology best practices. And I can't think of two better people to do this. You're going to be hearing from Josh Horowitz, who's the founder and CEO of Boulder Logic, and David Soroka, who's the founder and CEO of Point of Reference. And these are two highly respected executives and experts in this area. They have platforms and other technology solutions for managing reference programs that have passionate users and advocates among the reference community. They're long-term sponsors at our events at Customer Reference Forum and the Summit on Customer Engagement. And if you want to really get into depth about where technology is, reference technology, where it is, where it's headed, what makes sense for your situation, I can't think of two better guys to talk to. I've actually kibitzed some of the conversations they have with people, and I'm just astonished at the depth of their knowledge. So I'm delighted to have them with us here today for this class. Josh, you're going to be leading off, as I understand it, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bill. Happy to be here. So as the class description indicated, we're going to take a short three-dimensional walk through some of the building blocks of an enterprise customer reference management platform. And my thinking is that by looking at some of the individual components and some of the use cases, I'm hoping that it's going to be able to give folks a broader vision of what we've seen over the years of development of this platform as really the essential requirements. And I believe it's helpful because regardless of the technologies that you're using and that are available to you today, I think it's important to understand how the various pieces come together. And you might be faced with a situation where different folks in different parts of your organization have different perspectives on what your program is and what the tools that you should be using are. So again, I'm hoping this is going to give you a good broad-based perspective. We were approached even just yesterday by a very large enterprise technology company, and their aim was to try to get a picture of all of the components that come together. And so that's what we're going to do today. For those of you that don't know me or don't know Boulder Logic, there's me. Boulder Logic has been in business since 2003, so we're in our 10th year. We're a software company and a services company specifically focused on customer reference management. Our clients include companies like Jive and Marketo and ExactTarget and Siemens, Avaya, NetApp, and many others, all with the similar vision of helping to automate their customer reference program, grow their portfolio, and reduce the effort that's required to use references in the sales and marketing process. So what are we looking at here? Let's dive in and look at some of the pieces. The first is really at its foundation, a reference platform is about customer intelligence. It's about capturing the story of that individual and that company. And I think probably the most important element of it is really being able to get down at the individual level. So what a reference program is about, or a reference application is about, is having a really flexible profile, being able to capture details about the experience that that customer has, and really connecting and extending beyond the types of things that are traditionally captured in a normal CRM Salesforce automation system. So really extending out beyond that. So the customer intelligence platform is clearly the first piece of what we're talking about. The second piece is really a library of customer evidence. So you don't want to just have that list of customers or a database of customers without being able to capture content. And from our perspective, content can be anything from videos to short quotes or PowerPoint presentations. Making that all available in a single search experience is going to be able to allow folks to get a much richer perspective of your customers when they're searching, when they're considering using a customer for a live interaction. Access to content can be what defers some of those live requests and gives them an opportunity to share that content with their customers and their prospects directly. So a library of customer evidence is really the second piece. And that content can either be linked or it can be attached in the system. And I emphasize that because in many organizations there's already some type of sales enablement tool, there's some type of content management tool, and fundamentally while I believe in the idea of in concept of trying to have as much in a single environment as possible, realistically there are different use cases, different scenarios where folks are looking for that content, and the model that we typically like to advocate is giving folks access to the right materials at the right time. And so by using a linking strategy, you're avoiding duplicate content, but you can serve it up to them when they're thinking about the customer reference process. So taking the next step further beyond the content library itself, we see a customer reference platform as an opportunity to, oops, let's dive into that, as an opportunity for a content distribution platform as well. So rather than just downloading those pieces of content and sending them out, we've developed a really slick set of microsites that allow you to take that content and place it on a very personalized page. And the things that we think are important related to that is making sure that can be easily reshared with others via social, making sure that it is really dynamic to the audience, to the recipient of that page. And what that means is if you're sending that page out to somebody who's in France, for instance, you want that page to be immediately tailored dynamically to that French audience. And if that same page gets forwarded on to somebody who's in Germany, you want that page to retailer based on elements that are specific to the German language. So we've really, we believe that's an important piece as well. Also recognizing that there are going to be different different devices that they're visiting these microsites on, and so making sure that they dynamically tailor to the specific platform that they're being viewed on. So they're going to look better and different when that page is opened on a full-screen laptop versus on a tablet versus on a mobile device. So it's all about content in that sense. The next major component, and this is probably one of the major reasons folks go from sort of ad hoc tools to a more formal customer reference platform, is ability to support the request workflow. So when somebody actually does need a live request, being able to make sure that that can be fulfilled in a really efficient process. And the way that we've seen that break down, I've here illustrated some of the actors that are involved in this story. And you can see there's a number of different players. You've got the prospect, you've got the customer, you've got the relationship owner, which is often an account manager or somebody that owns that customer relationship. There's the salesperson we've indicated here is the person who needs the reference and needs it fast. And then there's the reference manager who's trying to hold all of these pieces together. So what we believe to be the necessary component of a request workflow is being able to allow for easy discovery of those customer relationships, being able to make sure that you're able to find them quickly, get real-time checks in terms of approval. So you want to reach out to the person that owns a relationship and make sure that it's not going to interfere with anything they're working on. That's the type of thing that can give confidence to that person that owns the relationship to be more forthcoming or giving in terms of their customers' involvement in this type of program. And being able to make sure it works on any type of device. So when that salesperson's out in the field, that they can initiate this process in a rapid fashion. So automating all of that, being able to track it is another major reason and major component of an enterprise reference platform. Beyond that, I would refer to usage thresholds. So another major area. And really what we're talking about here is being able to protect customers from overuse. The way that this is typically done is setting up some type of rules around how often the customer can be contacted, and this can be done in a variety of different ways, either by the total number of contacts or the duration between each of those contacts. One of the things that we've seen be a nice add-on to that is also being at the same time being able to track against underuse. The idea there being if a customer has agreed to be a reference as part of your program, making sure that if they're not being used for some reason that they're surfaced. So not only are you taking customers that are potentially being used a little bit too much out of the pool, you're bringing these that are underused up and surfacing them into the into use more readily. The next area that we'll talk about is participant recognition. Whole lot can be said about the different models and different ways of recognizing those folks that are participating in your program. We've seen everything from full-on gamification where you want to give visibility to the points they've accrued and the lifetime points, and we've also seen a very transactional model, so a model where customers are really almost paid for their time as participating in a reference. And then we've seen also a much more lighter weight sort of relationship-based monitoring where the customer doesn't necessarily know that they're going to receive some type of gift, but in the background you're able to track this, and at the end of the quarter being able to see who has accumulated certain number of points or credits based on the amount of activity that they've done. And in that level, this concept of rewarding customers is really more of an unexpected surprise as opposed to something more transaction-based. We're really seeing all of these models in use in different organizations. There usually are factors about internally within the company that determine which of those types of models are most applicable for your company. But suffice to say, being able to track that automatically, being able to, if you're going to set up a more transaction-based model, expire those points so that they don't accrue forever. Being able to give the customer direct visibility to the page so that they can monitor where they are if you're using that type of model are all parts of the capabilities that we see as really essential to customer recognition and a key part of the customer reference platform. The next area is project tracking. So we talked about before let's see if I can do that without doing that. So the idea there is that content that we talked about before, the development of that is typically a key area of the program. And that really puts the reference manager in the middle of a lot of different players, customers that are contributing their story, various approvers, drafts and versions, often many vendors that are involved. So this area of the enterprise customer reference platform refers to the various putting those projects together into a single pipeline. And the way that we've found that to really be helpful is if you can give access to those vendors directly to update while maintaining version control. It basically can take what otherwise is multiple spreadsheets tracking who's working on what and what status they're in and bringing it into one centralized view and really sort of have that pipeline visibility related to the creation of new content for your program. The next area, so the nomination pipeline. If folks that are attending this attended Miriam Rack's session previously talking about filling the dream pipeline, nominations are absolutely a key piece of that. We see it being really important to be able to provide a very tailorable form, something that can be presented to different audiences within the organization so that they see different amounts of fields and information that are relevant, and using that as a way of collecting that information. When that's mapped into your CRM system, making sure that there's no need to retype information, so having forms pre-populate is another key piece of it as well. So nominations being another really important element to the platform. Data connectors. So as I mentioned earlier, we see the reference platform as being an extension of the CRM application. We also see it being tied potentially to other systems. So whether it's your Net Promoter surveys or other information sources in the system, you need to make sure that you're not creating a completely isolated island. And so the way that we found to be most effective is, one, in this case I'm highlighting Salesforce.com, so providing a direct synchronization with your CRM system. Secondly, providing the ability to take structured data from spreadsheets and make it really easy to populate that right into the reference management system, so that it's not a project every time you want to update new information, and that also gives you the ability to tap into sources that may be infrequently used as sources, so not necessarily the point where you would need to create a full integration, because most systems are able to get data out into a spreadsheet format. But those systems that you do work with on a regular basis using an API, which is an application programming interface, a way of connecting to applications and making sure that that can be used to keep your data up to date, are pretty much the major elements of data connectors. This area, survey tools, is one that we've received a lot of enthusiasm from our clients and prospective clients recently. Really, it's the idea of being able to reach out to different audiences and be able to collect updated information. So when you think about the overall customer reference platform, making sure that your information is up to date and complete is among the most important things that you can do. And I know in the subsequent session, David's going to talk a little bit about adoption, and I can only imagine that the importance of keeping data up to date is going to be one of the topics that I imagine he'll speak to. Being able to do that efficiently, I see as being a really key piece. So one of the things that we believe to be sort of the next area of an enterprise platform is being able to run surveys directly out of the tool, being able to tap different audiences with requests for small amounts of information. So instead of asking them to come in and look at broad forms and asking them to fill in a lot of details, or trying to send out a survey from a random survey tool and then massage that data back into the database, being able to run that right from your reference platform gives you the ability to detect which fields need to be updated and then be able to trigger these surveys directly from that. And so being able to take that to different stakeholders within your organization as well as out to the customer themselves, we see being as a really essential component of the overall enterprise platform. The last area that I'll speak to is about reporting, and this is another fundamental area when you're looking at trying to bring automation and technology to your reference application. So being able to run against activity metrics, pipeline, bottlenecks in your process, ROI type of reporting. Again, I expect in David's presentation he's going to talk a little bit about how being able to track various activities to see what adoption is, to see who's using the system, to see where there are gaps, to be a really important element. So this is another key area of the enterprise reference platform. I hope this was a good sort of overview of the major component areas. My aim, as I mentioned at the start, was to give you a real three-dimensional walkthrough of those building blocks so that you have a sense of kind of what an enterprise reference platform is comprised of. I'd be super happy to provide product demonstrations or answer any questions, as Bill mentioned at the front. We've been doing this for quite a long time. We've seen a variety of different situations, and I guess sort of as a summation, being able to be flexible to meet all of those situations is one of the key elements as well. That's really all the topics that I wanted to cover. So I'm gonna pass it over to David and give him back a little extra time, and hope this was helpful to folks.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, so my topic is going to be about user adoption of technology. And this was a quote that actually was in a profile written by Serious Decisions about us, and I thought that it really hit home. Sometimes the analysts don't always get the message, but through their interviews and their understanding of the marketplace, they clearly did. So I'm going to focus on that second paragraph down there in particular in my presentation today about the processes, the resources with the right skills, the clean and robust database, et cetera. They all contribute to adoption of reference center technology or reference system technology. First, I'd like to do a quick little poll with all of you about how you define adoption. So the poll is open. In this case, you can pick multiple items in here, but go ahead and start clicking away, and let's see what comes back. There's lots of different ways to look at adoption, and I'm sure a lot of you have given this some thought. Maybe your executives have even talked internally about what they'd like to see when they think about user adoption. A lot of emphasis on reference activity in the system, the amount of it in the system. That's great. Requests submitted. Interesting. And of course, I wish there was a way to collect the other information so that we could ponder some of that, but there isn't a way in this tool. That's okay. It seems to be a pretty low percentage. Great. Okay, so requests submitted seems to be the winner so far, and the percent of reference activity in the system is second. That's great information, and hopefully that gives you guys a little insight into what your peers think when they think of user adoption. Looks like we've got a little over half of the folks have voted now, so I'll give it just another maybe 15, 20 seconds. Okay, good. Looks like it's sort of settled down. So note those, and I'm sure this will be available from Bill, and we'll take note of it as well and make it available after the presentation. Okay. There's what we've got, by the way. Those are the results where we settled in on request submitted number 1. All right, continuing back onto the presentation. So when you think about user adoption, the most important thing about getting support for your program is being able to prove that it's being adopted, right? And that really comes down to usage of one form or another, some of the things that were just in that poll, whether it's you're counting logins or content downloaded and shared or whatever it might be, ultimately to get to the outcome information, which is how revenue is influenced by your efforts, the win rate, the total number of opportunities that you have in the system and how many are touched in some way by the reference system, whether that's through content or individual customer references. There's a lot of variables to think about here, and I wanted to get this out of the way first in this presentation. When you think about usage and the frequency of usage, there's a lot of things that affect that. You can kind of divide up your sales force for one thing, and you can look at the roles of those salespeople. Some are hunters and some are farmers. If you're familiar with that kind of comparison, the hunters are the ones out there looking for new leads, generating new business, and the farmers are more of an account management model. Sometimes there's even a formal handoff between the two groups. Obviously, the hunters are going to be bigger users of the reference program than the farmers, so you kind of have to think about that as you sort of look at how people are using the system. The tenure tends to have a lot to do with usage. So the earlier they are in the tenure, and we did a study of this not too long ago in a client of ours that had about 600 salespeople, and we asked them the question, what's your tenure? Choose one of these, and then also how many times per month do you interact with the reference program or the reference system? We had a couple questions, and clearly those that were newer to the program were bigger users. And probably that's easily explained because the longer you're with an organization, the more you have your own customers that you've sold to personally, you kind of build this little cache of customer references, and you'll probably end up using those a fair amount. So tenure certainly has an indication, which, by the way, should make you be thinking about new hire training and your presence in the new hire training opportunities. Focus is another one. If you've got a group that focuses on major accounts, where one account is really worth like the typical 3 or 4 accounts in the non-major account segment, then they're probably going to be primarily using references within a company to sell into other parts of that company. So their usage of the system and the program are going to be different. There's seasonality issues. Certainly in the summertime, we see usually decreased activity across most of our accounts, particularly those that are based in Europe, because they do take extended holidays in the summertime. Average sales length, how much time between one deal to the next. If you've got something that happens once, or a deal that closes every 4 to 6 months or 6 months to a year even, and that's just the model, there's going to be longer periods of time in between uses of the program and the system. And I have to mention this one, all of you know them, there are certain salespeople that are just sort of tool averse. And no matter how great the tool is for other people, other peers in the organization, they just generally don't adopt tools of any sort, and reference systems fall into that category, just like CRM does and the lead gen tools and everything else. So you kind of have to factor that in when you look at any kind of results that you get from surveys of usage, or you're just looking at usage that is tracked in your system. So next question is, what do you think is a realistic percentage of adoption? Do you think it's 50%, 60%, 80%? Do you think 100% should be the case when you have a successful adoption rate? Let's vote on this one and see what the general consensus is. And a lot of the factors are going to be some that we just discussed, and I'll cover a few more as well in terms of the percentages and how you look at those. Looks like so far things are falling between 50 and 69% and 70 and 79%. No one has chosen 90 to 100%, not surprisingly. We have a handful that are choosing 25 to 49%. Good, looks good. It looks like the voting is stabilized, so I'm going to close that and share it with you. And the winner is somewhere between 70 and 79%, seems to be the general consensus. Well, so here's some rate considerations. First of all, as I pointed out before, you want to kind of look at this by segment. If you've got, let's say, major accounts people, and you've got inside sales people, and you've got the account management folks, you really have to take those things into consideration and perhaps even set different goals for different segments. 100% is not going to be realistic, and it's nice to see that none of you had chosen that, at least not for all segments. But let's say you had a very small inside sales team, maybe it's 4 people or 5 people. You probably could expect near 100% in a small team like that that has a really good use for the system. The other thing I would mention is sometimes it's not a volume game in terms of adoption, because if you're looking at outcomes and the system and or the program itself has influenced $40 million in a quarter through 4 deals, that more than justifies the ROI of the program and the system. So don't neglect that aspect of it either. All right, let's move into some of the best practices then. So we've covered sort of the basis of what is user adoption, how do you look at user adoption, how do you think about it. These are our recommendations for boosting your adoption. First thing is, take the sales perspective into consideration very carefully. And what I mean by that is that the data structure, how the information is organized, and the tagging that you use should be familiar to salespeople. That's often a mistake that we see in some of our accounts during the implementation phase, and we try to advise on that and often have good success. The terminology, for instance, can sometimes be what product management comes up with, or the brand folks have come up with, and yet it's not what salespeople refer to or what their prospects refer to when they're talking about the products and solutions your company offers. So we often talk about aspirational terminology, like we hope the market thinks of us like this. But in reality, sometimes the market wants to think about you the way they want to think about you, and the salespeople, being in general pleasers, are going to take that path as well. So if they get confused trying to find stuff in your database because the terminology used doesn't match what they use and what their prospects are using, it's hard for them to get comfortable and adopt that technology. Josh mentioned alignment with CRM systems, and we're certainly big believers of that. Anything that's in your CRM system in terms of, let's say you're talking about industries, or you're talking about the products or the product hierarchy, those things should match exactly with your reference technology. And hopefully if you're in a Salesforce environment and you're integrated, that's going to always be the case, sort of a no-brainer. If you're not in Salesforce and you're trying to work with, let's say, Siebel or Sugar CRM or Microsoft CRM or who knows what it could be, the same rules apply. You should try and match the values and the technology and the fields so that everything is familiar. Just one less learning curve piece for the sales team. It's also important to make sure that the information you have in your system supports today's opportunities. A couple weeks ago, I worked with a new customer who's starting a program. They have a fair amount of case studies and videos, for instance, but they're all based on older sales approaches and older models of their solutions. So the consensus from the salespeople that we interviewed was, yeah, we've got 50 of these pieces or 25 of these pieces, but none of them really help us sell what we're selling today because we've changed everything about the way we sell. And in fact, some of our products aren't even changed or aren't even named this anymore. So you got to make sure the accounts and the content itself both support today's opportunities and not yesterday's. There's the first time through, right, getting your system up and running, and then there's how you make sure that it continues to model the needs of the sales folks. And so continuous feedback is a big part of that. We're big advocates of doing periodic surveys, frequency, sort of left up to you based on your company culture and all the other things that are being sent to the sales force, but it would seem at least every 6 months, if not annually, you ought to be doing surveys and getting caught up with the sales team. Now, surveys are good because you get a broad spectrum of feedback, but sales advisory boards keep you in touch in between. It's almost like, there's the annual summit, and then there's these workshops that we're doing right now to keep you in touch in between. So a sales advisory board might be anywhere between 6, 10 people. They're the people that are great contributors and have opinions from the sales perspective, and you can constantly use them as a sounding board through the gaps in between your surveys to make sure that you're on top of things and where the direction is headed for the sales force. And of course, just listening in on sales meetings and being at sales events makes a big difference as well. You hear what they're up against. You hear strategic direction changes and things like that when you're closer to the sales force. Second best practice, understand how users search. Of course, this is essential. If you're just starting a program, one of the best sources for finding out how users search is to look at those email blasts. If you're not copied on those already, make sure you're copied on them as you prepare to implement technology, automation, because it'll very clearly spell out in the queries, I'm looking for a customer who is in this industry using these products integrated with X, and their use cases are this, and so on. You can basically take that information and translate into the dimensions that you support in your system, in your technology for search. Use case or user experience scenarios is another way to find out. If you set them down in front of whatever tool you have today and you give them some scenarios. You have a customer, or a prospect I should say, and they're in the financial services industry, and you give them the rest of the details. How would you go about finding them? And watch what they type in, especially if there's an open text box in a solution that you're using. It's mind expanding, and you'll realize what you have to do differently in terms of tagging and improve results. And lastly, we like to say find a balance here in terms of the search support. you can go crazy, right? You can bring all sorts of details into your reference technology for search purposes. But don't forget that anything you bring in has to be maintained. And also don't confuse what you might be looking for from a reference management perspective with what salespeople tend to look for. So you can probably skinny it down if you think twice about it, and you'll find that a lot of the things that you came up with in the initial list are kind of outliers. Like, yeah, somebody once asked me for, this kind of information about an account before, finding a good match. And how many times did that happen over the last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? So be judicious, because ultimately you end up having to live with the maintenance part of this equation. Centralizing data. Of course, you got redundant information sources. What you're going to create is confusion, and salespeople are never going to be quite sure that whatever they're looking at, let's say there's 3 different ways to get the same information, 3 different systems, they're never going to be sure that one of them is sort of the master and has everything. So what they end up being rather unproductive, going from one to the next, just checking and double checking, making sure that they're not missing something that could be just perfect for what they're looking for. So, consolidate as much as you possibly can. Josh mentioned linking to a single file in the case of content. Even if it's available in other places, at least it's all linked back to a single source file, so that when you make version changes or whatever, everything's pointing to the same document. Again, the version control is a big piece of the maintenance nightmare that you want to avoid, and consolidation will help with that. Whenever you can, leverage other data systems, also mentioned in the previous presentation. So if you can't move it into your reference technology, which is where you may think it belongs, then set up some data integration, again, through the data exchange, FTP, or through API for real-time. Lots of different ways to make that work. Information searchability. Of course, if it can't be found, why do you have it in the system? So we have cases where we've had accounts where there's gaps in the tagging of their data, and it's been there for a while, and it just hasn't been something they've been able to get around to. And until they can fill in those gaps, those pieces of content or those accounts are not going to come back in search results. So you got to be really diligent about the tagging and the metadata that you associate with data in your system. Filtering is just a term that we use when you say, I want to filter by an industry or by a geography or whatever it might be. Just make sure that that's complete. Run a report. Look for the holes. Fill in the gaps. And I'll talk about that process in the next slide. And then, of course, any technology that you use should support full text indexing, because people will use keywords that may have been overlooked in your metadata. They may not be a filter choice, but they may exist in the body of the document itself or in the fields of an account record or something like that. So strive for that full text indexing whenever possible. Quality search results. Of course, accuracy is important as well as completeness. When you have accuracy, people perceive it as reliable and credible. They can rely on it to find the right information, the right matched information based on any of the things in this list and beyond. Whether it's the number of licenses, the products that are used, etc. So with those 2 previous things, the accuracy and the completeness, we like to talk about always be updating, just like salespeople like to talk about always be selling. Always be updating. A couple different approaches here. Of course, there's manual approaches, the white glove approach where you have somebody reaching out and periodically making sure that fields are correct and complete. Those can be people in the reference team. They might be salespeople, particularly if you're integrated with your CRM system. The CRM system should really be the master, if you will, of information. So you make the changes there. It, of course, is then made or leveraged by your reference technology. The automated approach, there was a great presentation at the summit this year from Marketo with enterprise marketing automation tools being pretty prevalent now. I don't think we have a client that doesn't have Marketo or Eloqua or Primo or something in use. These are great tools, and they're integrated with Salesforce if you have Salesforce, which the majority of our clients do. So you can run those campaigns and reach out to your customers or to internal people who might be the better source of information about the accounts, and have them do the updating as needed, picking, again, smaller bits of information. We agree with Josh on that one. Not necessarily please update these 20 fields, but here's 5 fields this month, and maybe in a month later we ask for 5 more fields or whatever it might be. And this data gets directly populated into Salesforce, which then is leveraged by the reference technology if that integration exists. And then the last piece, again, it was touched on, if you have data in other systems, like we have clients that have the ultimate record of, for instance, number of licenses in use in their Oracle financial system. It's what's in their CRM system isn't very reliable, but what's in Oracle Financials is what generates the bills, so you better believe it's going to be accurate. Or there might be some information in Remedy related to support issues that might have some impact on referenceability. You can integrate with those, again, through data exchange or through API integration so that you're not having to manually update those fields or ask for information that exists somewhere else in a reliable system. There's something to be said for quantity as well, for volume in your system. And for those of you, again, that are looking to launch a new program, it's really important that you have the critical mass at launch. You don't want people's first impression to be, wow, this is pretty thin, not much here. And you have to look at the activity that you have in your ecosystem. And we're big proponents of saying, look at the sales pipeline report. You'll find out where the needs are, which industries are getting the most activity, which products are being sold the most, what use cases need to be supported by both content and by the customer references that you have in your database. And look at it by segment. There's always a value in looking for the 80-20 rule. You might rule out some segments because there's just not heavy reference activity there, and you can focus on the place where you can have the biggest bang for the buck. There was a great post, I don't know, it was probably 6 months ago. I'm sure most of you are members of CRKSN, the CRKSN group in LinkedIn. And the post was, what's the right number of references to have in your reference program? So this is an actual link to that discussion, but if you're members of CRKSN, you can go out and find it by putting in that search text, right number of references, you'll find it. There are lots of people putting input into it, including us, and it really helped provide a number of different formulas and approaches for deciding what's the right number of references I need to have to support the activity in my program. And then the last piece about right number is, again, the current activity you can quickly find by looking at your pipeline report. That's fairly easy. Future activity, that requires that you're in touch with company objectives and directions, whether there's an expansion into a new segment, maybe it's a new industry, maybe it's a new geography, maybe there's an expansion of the partner channel. You got to be, of course, aligned with those things for a couple reasons. One, so that in practical terms, you're providing adequate support. But the second thing, of course, is you can always show how you're supporting the company objectives when executives want to know, what's the value of this reference program? How does it really relate to my personal objectives as CEO or COO or CMO? This is a no-brainer. We all say it. There's got to be training. But I think it's often neglected, and it's certainly forgotten after the initial launch in a lot of cases. So we like to bring this up whenever we can. Don't forget. Don't stop. The options and formats are important. Make sure that there are video training pieces for your sales team or any of the other users. Make sure that there are guides that they can open up. We call them quick guides in our system that are just step-by-step with screenshots for doing the most common things, common tasks in the system. Make sure that there's an instructor-led option. Maybe it's once a month and it's a half-hour training session open to everybody who's interested. Because the timing of it's important. I'm sure most of you have seen this who have a system up and running. Salespeople generally pay attention the most when they actually have something to do, right? So they're in crunch time. They got to get something done in an hour. They didn't attend the earlier training, and they need it now. So it's good to provide, again, different options and formats so they can get what they need if they're not familiar with the system. Inline help's good too. So if they're in the system, they can click little icons, or you can have that out in the margins or whatever your tool supports so they can get real-time help as they're going through the system. Making access easy. as opposed to the story in the lower right-hand corner there where it was very difficult to get through those green doors. It's really nice to have integration with your CRM system. And again, most of our clients are in Salesforce and are integrated, and that's great. Makes life a lot easier. There's no need for single sign-on or any other access methods because once you're in Salesforce, you're accessing the tool. Portal integration is great too. Links from other places where salespeople are to your customer reference program system. That's a nice thing to do. And worst case scenario, if you're not integrated with a tool, at least don't make them remember separate credentials. And you can use any of the familiar standard technologies out there like OAuth or SAML to make it easy for them to, one link, take them right into the system and begin using it. So, in summary, system usage, which is all about adoption, makes the quantifiable outcomes possible. You can start to demonstrate things, capture them in metrics and reports and dashboards, which ultimately gets you to the final goal, which is executive support. And I don't mean to say the final goal isn't supporting your sales team, but if you're supporting your sales team and nobody knows about it, and you don't have the executive awareness, your program is always vulnerable to changes in the organization, personnel, financial budget, et cetera. So it's, the adoption piece should definitely not be overlooked. I wanted to share some resources with you. We have white papers. One of them covers much of what I did today. The other talks about not system adoption, but program adoption, which these links will take you to. And again, this presentation will be available both by sending me an email or it'll be posted on Bill's site at some date shortly after this. There's a good blog post from Forrester on user adoption. There's a company called Tritons, that's my best guess at the pronunciation, that I came across probably a year ago. They have a little assessment that you can go through. Now they're focused mainly on CRM adoption, but there's a lot of parallels here. And I think it's worth going through this assessment because it asks questions that might help you uncover where some adoption issues might be in your organization. And there's another blog post about 6 rules of user adoption that I thought was pretty good. And then lastly, a link to our maturity model tool, which covers a lot of the things that do affect adoption, a lot of the things that I talked about within the system. So there I am, point of reference. I'm happy to talk to any of you further about user adoption or any of our solutions. We are a technology company. We do content development. We do supplemental staffing, part-time and full-time, and we also do consulting in the form, at least in the beginning, of in the form of an evolution workshop, we call it, which is a one-day workshop that goes through your system, your environment, and helps you plot your next steps in achieving what we call reference nirvana. And there's my email address. Feel free to use it. And that's all I got. Bill, Ann, any closing comments?
Yes, David, great job. We have I see a question. Actually, it came from me. I don't know if others are submitting questions, but I've got a quick question for you guys, and that is a situation. It's a situation I've run into. I'm working with, and I think this is probably pretty common. But they have their customer database is controlled by their IT folks, and the database is terrible. I mean, you wouldn't believe the information that it leaves out, and they probably clearly need third-party solutions like Salesforce.com and your guys. So any advice on how to, in any effort to get this implemented is going to run into a battle with IT. So in your experience, and this, either David or Josh or both of you, how do you overcome this turf battle that's going to emerge with IT in a situation like that?
David, you want to take first swag and I'll follow?
Sure, happy to. What I would say, there's a push and there's the pull approach to these kind of situations. The push would be to try and hammer on IT to show them how the data is terrible, et cetera. And the pull would be to use sales to help you with this battle. So if you launched a survey, asked them about various questions about the quality of the database and the data inside of it, and used their feedback to make the case, it's a lot easier. It's rather than me saying I think it needs to be changed as a reference manager perspective, I'm saying, look, the main users of this system are telling us it's bad.
I'd agree with that. You know, fundamentally, IT is there to serve the business, and if there is a clear case, like you described, Bill, that the business is not being well served, then it's really probably just a matter of getting that some executive attention and you know, putting that on the table. If IT is going to continue to own the system, then that's fine. They just, you know, have certain responsibilities to the business, and typically what we find is, you know, when a heightened level of requirement is expected of them, IT, as they should, has to consider all options, including building, buying, and so forth. So it's really just a question of identifying where the data gap is, where the requirement gap is, and bringing the visibility up to the right level.
Yeah. Good. Thanks, guys. Well, thank you both for a very, as always, enlightening information. I enjoy listening to both of you guys talk. Your knowledge, depth of experience, I think these are just terrific. So thanks for sharing that. And thanks to all of you for attending. Our next master class will be next month on May 22nd at the same time. We'll be talking about making references in social media a marriage made in heaven. So I hope you can join us for that. We'll be sending out notifications to everybody who's registered. And in the meantime, thank you all again, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Bill.